Thank you for bearing with us. We are now ready to start closing plenary. Beyond Big Tech Empires. My name is Nick Dearden. For those who weren't here at the beginning, I'm the Director of Global Justice Now, along with the Balanced Economy project we put on this conference today. And we're really pleased that we have. I have learned so much from our inspiring speakers, and I'm sure you have as well. In this final session, we've terrified you to death all day, explaining the problems of big tech. We're going to offer you some hope, and some optimism, and some solutions. And I've got two fantastic speakers to do that. There's a lot of people in the group. We are going to do a Q&A. I might not be able to get to everyone, but I'll try my best. We also have people on the live stream and some people outside as well. So I've asked the speakers to speak loudly and clearly. I'm really sorry we can't take questions from the live stream, but you can talk among yourselves. And Graham, our tech expert, is monitoring the chat. So introduce yourselves and feel free to chat there. It's with enormous pleasure that I introduce our first plenary speaker, Cory Doctorow. He really needs no introduction, I'm sure, but I will give him a little introduction. He's a Canadian-British novelist, journalist, and technology activist who has long campaigned on digital rights, copyright reform, and anti-monopoly policy. He's the author, of course, of the very famous Enshittification, Why Everything Suddenly Got Worse and What to Do About It, which has almost entered the Oxford English Dictionary now, I think, as a concept, as well as many science fiction novels, including Walk Away and Lost Cause, and he's a special consultant to the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Cory's going to speak for about 40 minutes, and then Sofia, who I will introduce in time, is going to respond, and then it'll be over to you for Q&A. Cory, I'm so grateful. I know that you have been on a plane all night, so I can't believe you've got much rest, but we're really, really honoured to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As you heard, I've been a digital rights activist for a long time. That's what he said. In fact, it's 25 years that I've been working at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And it struck me over the last few years that there are some really important parallels between digital rights activism and climate activism, in as much as they're both abstract and technical, and they relate to issues that are a very long way in the future, and for extremely good reasons. People mostly care about things that are happening right now and are very concrete. So the job of a digital rights activist, like the job of a climate activist, is to find ways to raise the salience of these issues. Because if we wait until these issues are rendered concrete and immediate, it will be because everything is on fire and it will be too late to do anything about it. So for most of my adult life, I've occupied myself with coming up with metaphors, parables, framing devices, narratives, to get people to care about these digital rights issues before it was too late. And a few years ago, I struck gold with my dirty little word, enshittification. And it turns out that all it takes is a minor license to vulgarity to get people to engage. So what is enshittification? I describe it as this three-stage process by which platforms decay. In stage one, a platform is good to its end users, but it finds a way to lock them in. So we can think here about Facebook. In 2006, Mark Zuckerberg came to a crossroads with Facebook. He decided to open it up to the general public, not just American college kids with a .edu email address, but anyone who wanted to join. And he had a problem, which was that everyone who might want to use social media already had an account on a rival service called MySpace. So he went to those MySpace users and he said, look, I know you like hanging out with your friends there on MySpace, but I don't know if you realize this. MySpace is owned by an evil, crapulent, senescent, immortal vampire billionaire named Rupert Murdoch, who spies on you with every hour that God sends. And nobody should use social media owned by a sinister billionaire, especially not one who'll spy on you. So we flocked to Facebook. And then we locked ourselves into Facebook. We locked ourselves into Facebook through something economists call the collective action problem, which is basically the economist way of saying no matter how much you love your friends, they're a giant pain in the ass. And if the 6 people in your group chat can't agree on where you're going to go for a beer this weekend, how are you going to agree when it's time to leave Facebook or where you should go next? So long as you love your friend more than you hate Mark Zuckerberg, he can make things worse for you and you will stay on his platform. So that's stage one of enshittification. Be good to end users, but find a way to lock those users in. And that means you can move on to stage 2 of enshittification, where secure in the knowledge that your users are impaired from departing, you can make things worse for them in order to make things better for business customers. So Mark Zuckerberg decides to court different groups of business customers. One of them was advertisers. And he went to the advertisers and he said, do you remember we told these younkies that we weren't going to spy on them? Obviously, we were lying. We spy on them from asshole to appetite. Give us remarkably small amounts of money. We will target ads to them with exquisite fidelity. And because we're such proud craftspeople, we have erected a whole building full of engineers who do nothing but fight fraud. Which means that if you give us $1 to find a user and show them an ad, we will find that user and we're going to shove that ad in their face, and you're going to know that they're going to see it. So advertisers piled in and they got locked in too, which means that Facebook was ready to enter stage 3 of enshittification, making things worse for its business customers as well as its end users. So for advertisers, they found that prices soared, ad targeting fidelity plummeted, and ad fraud exploded in ways that beggar belief. So in 2017, Procter & Gamble thought maybe these surveillance ads aren't performing the way they used to. Why don't we try taking our $200 million annual spend on surveillance advertising and bring it to 0 and see what happens to the performance of our products? They saw a 0% drop in sales because to a first approximation, no one saw those ads. They just disappeared down the fraud hole. So everyone's getting a bad deal. The quantum of material in your feed that you've asked to see has dwindled to a kind of mingy homeopathic residue. And the resulting void has been filled with things that people are being charged billions of dollars to show you, and they're getting ripped off too. So Facebook didn't screw its users to benefit its advertisers. Facebook screwed its users, it screwed its advertisers, it screwed its publishers, it screwed its developers. It screwed everyone to benefit itself. But this equilibrium, where all the value is transferred from users and business customers to the firm, its executives and its shareholders, that's a very brittle equilibrium. Because the difference between, God, I hate Facebook, but I can't seem to stop using it, and God, I hate Facebook, and I'm never using it again, is razor thin. All it takes is one live stream mass shooting, a giant privacy scandal, a whistleblower, and people vote for the exits. And when that happens, shareholders stage these mass sell-offs because they're like, oh, well, maybe this is the end of the growth run for Facebook. We better get out now before everyone else starts to sell. And then the company panics. And being technical people, they have a technical term for panicking. They call it pivoting. And that's how it came to be that in 2021, Mark Zuckerberg arose from his sarcophagus. He intoned, hearken to me, brothers and sisters, for I have had a vision. I know that I told you that your future would consist of arguing with your most racist uncle, using the primitive text interface that I created in my dorm room to non-consensually rate the fuckability of Harvard undergraduates. However, the true future has been revealed to me, and it is one in which I transform you and everyone you love into a legless, sexless, low-polygon, heavily surveilled cartoon character so that I can imprison you in a virtual world I stole from a 25-year-old dystopian satirical cyberpunk novel that I call the metaverse. And that is the final stage of enshittification. The platform is a pile of shit. So enshittification, it has a lot of explanatory power, but it also raises some important questions, like why do we keep using these platforms even though they've become so terrible? Now, the economics trade, they have an answer for this. They say that this is down to something they call revealed preferences. The idea behind revealed preferences is that if you say you don't like something, but you keep using it, then you must have a revealed preference for it. Now, this is the kind of belief you can only take seriously if you've incurred that kind of specific neurological injury that you can only get from doing a degree in economics, the neurological injury that makes you incapable of perceiving or reasoning about power. A believer in revealed preferences will observe someone in the world who has flogged their kidney to make the rent and say, well, look at that person. They have a revealed preference for only having one kidney. To reveal someone's true preferences, you have to give them real choices. And that's what Apple did with iOS, the operating system of the iPhone, where they gave users a one-click checkbox to opt out of Facebook spying on their mobile phones. And 96% of iOS users clicked that checkbox. I can only assume the other 4% were either drunk or Facebook employees, or maybe drunk Facebook employees, which actually makes a lot of sense because if I worked for Facebook, I would be drunk all the time. But at the very same time as Apple was turning this checkbox on, they also activated surveillance for iOS on their own behalf. They started collecting all the same data Facebook had been collecting for the same purpose, to power a targeted ad network, which users were not told about or given a chance to opt out of. Apple collects all that same data, and when they were caught doing it, they lied about it. And no one has released another update for iOS that lets you block Apple spying, though the 96% of iOS users who block Facebook spying have certainly revealed a strong preference for not being spied upon by tech companies. Now, why hasn't this happened? You'd think that someone could make a lot of money selling the Stop Apple Spying on You update for iOS. And the iPhone could run that program because the iPhone can run every program. Because formally speaking, the iPhone is a computer, which is to say a Turing-complete universal von Neumann machine. That's what computer scientists call an engine capable of computing every valid program. Every computer can run every program. And what that means is that every time Apple installs a 10-foot pile of shit in your phone somewhere in Cupertino, California, some British programmer could make a 4-meter ladder that they could instantaneously, costlessly distribute to everyone in the world that lets you go right over that pile of shit. So why haven't they? Well, they have it in America because it's been illegal since 1998. That's when Bill Clinton signed a law called the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or DMCA. And Section 1201 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act establishes a felony for modifying technology without the manufacturer's permission. So under DMCA 1201, it is a crime to alter the functioning of a digital product or service unless the manufacturer approves of that modification. And crucially, this is true whether or not the modification you are making is to achieve a lawful or unlawful end. So practically speaking, if you design a product or a service with even the flimsiest of systems to prevent modification of the application code or the operating system for the device, it becomes a felony, a jailable offense to modify the code or that firmware. And it's also a felony to disclose how someone else might go about doing this, which means that even security researchers who discover vulnerabilities in devices that would be highly salient for us to know about because we trust them with our information, our safety, our integrity, even those people risk prison sentences for disclosing it because someone might use that information about a defect in a product to jailbreak it and do something with it the manufacturer just prefers. So under anti-circumvention law, these laws that ban modification, any manufacturer can trivially turn any device, any service into a no-go zone whereby they can criminalize the research into defects in their products, criminalize the act of reporting on those defects, and criminalize the act of remediating those defects. It's a law that Jay Freeman calls felony contempt of business model. And anti-circumvention became American law in 1998 when Bill Clinton signed the DMCA. But before you start snickering at Americans, you should know that every other country in the world went on to pass a law just like this. In the European Union, it came in through Article 6 of the Copyright Directive in 2001. Now, it makes a certain twisted sense for America to enact a law like this. After all, they are the world's tech powerhouse, home to the biggest, most powerful tech companies in the world. By making it illegal to modify digital products without the manufacturer's biggest, most powerful tech companies in the world, by making it illegal to modify digital products without the manufacturer's permission, America enhances the rent-extracting possibilities for the most valuable firms on its stock exchange. But why would Europe pass a law like this? Europe is a net importer of technology from America. By extending legal protections to tech companies that want to steal Europeans' data and money, the EU facilitates a one-way transfer of value from Europeans to American firms. So why would they do it? Well, let me tell you about the circumstances in which other countries came to enact their own anti-circumvention laws, and perhaps we'll spot a pattern that explains it. In Australia, they got a version of this law through the US-Australia Free Trade Agreement, which obliges Australia to enact an anti-circumvention law. Canada and Mexico got ours. I'm like all the best Americans, I'm Canadian. We got ours first through NAFTA and then through the son of NAFTA, USMCA, which obliges Canada and Mexico to enact anti-circumvention laws. Andean nations like Chile got their anti-circumvention laws through bilateral trade agreements with the United States, which obliged them to enact anti-circumvention laws. And Central American nations got theirs through the Central America Free Trade Agreement, which obliges them to enact anti-circumvention laws. Now, you've probably spotted the pattern by now. The US Trade Representative has forced every one of America's trading partners into adopting anti-circumvention law to facilitate the extraction of those countries' people's data and money on behalf of American firms. But of course, this only raises another question, which is, Why would every other country in the world agree to let America steal their people's money and data and block their own domestic tech sector from making interoperable products that plug into America's defective tech exports that prevent this theft? Well, I have an anecdote that I think will unravel the riddle for you. Before Viktor Orban rose to power, I used to summer teach at a program at the Central European University in Budapest. It was a doctoral program in political science, and the students were often people who had served in public service and were coming back to do a PhD. And one summer, I'd given a lecture on anti-circumvention law, and one of my students approached me. Now, this student had been the culture minister for a Central American country during the negotiations of the Central American Free Trade Agreements. And they said that during those negotiations, they got a call from DC, and it was their trade negotiator, who said, I know you told me that under no circumstances should we give in to the Americans on anti-circumvention law, but they've told us that if we don't, they will not accept our coffee exports anymore. And so I'm afraid we are going to have to sign this deal. So that's it. That is why every government in the world allowed American tech companies to declare open season on the data and money of the people who live in their borders. The alternative was tariffs. Well, I don't know if you've heard, but there are tariffs now. I mean, if someone threatens to burn your house down, unless we do as you're told, and you do it, and they burn your house down anyway, you don't have to keep doing what they told you to do. In fact, you're a sucker if you keep doing what they told you to do. So happy Liberation Day, everyone. Now, so far, every country in the world has had one of two responses to the Trump tariffs. The first one is give Trump everything he asked for except for Greenland and hope that he stops being mad at you. And this has been a complete failure. Right? You give it to Trump an inch, he takes a mile. Give Trump an inch, he will take fucking Greenland. So capitulation has been a failure. But so has been the other tactic, retaliatory tariffs. That's what we did in Canada. Our top move has been levying tariffs on the goods we import from America, making the things that we buy more expensive, which is a very weird way to punish America. It's like punching ourselves in the face as hard as we can and hoping the downstairs neighbor says ouch. Worse, it's indiscriminate. Why whack some poor farmer in a state that begins and ends with a vowel when he tries to export his corn to us? That guy never did anything bad to Canada. There is a third possible response to the tariffs, though, one that's just sitting there waiting to be tried. What if we were to repeal our anti-circumvention law? If you're a technologist or an investor based in the country that's repealed its anti-circumvention law, you could go into business making disinshittifying products that plug into America's defective tech exports and allow the people who own and use those products to use them in ways that are good for them and detrimental to the shareholders of those American firms. Think about John Deere tractors. When a farmer's John Deere tractor breaks down, they are expected to repair it, swapping in new parts and assemblies to replace whatever's gone wrong, but the tractor does not recognize those new parts and will not start working again until the farmer spends a couple $100 and waits a few days for a John Deere representative to come out to the farm and type an unlock code into the tractor that certifies that some Dane geld has been transferred before the tractor can start working. Modifying a tractor to bypass this activation step would violate anti-circumvention law, meaning that every farmer in the world is stuck with this rip-off garbage because their own governments will lock up anyone who makes a product to allow farmers to fix their own tractors. So Canada, we could repeal Bill C-11, our Copyright Modernization Act of 2012, and that would mean that a company like Honeybee, a big powerhouse in Canada, where they make tractor front ends and attachments, they could hire some smart grads from University of Waterloo, or grandiosely called MIT North, and put them to work jailbreaking John Deere's firmware, and they could sell it to everyone in the world. They could sell that crack to anyone with an internet connection and a payment method, including the farmers in America whose corn we are currently tariffing. It is hard to convey how much money is on the table here. But let's just take one example. Apple's App Store. Apple forces everyone who sells through an app to use their payment processor. And their payment processor creams off a 30% commission on every payment processed through an app on the iPhone. 30%. This is such a profitable line of business. Apple makes $100 billion a year on it. It is their single most profitable line of business, the biggest number on their balance sheet every year. Now, if the European Union were to repeal Article 6 of the Copyright Directive, then some smart geeks in Finland could reverse engineer Apple's bootloaders, make a little hardware dongle to jailbreak phones so they can use alternative app stores, and that dongle could be sold along with support to make sure it works to anyone in the world who wants to go into business competing with Apple for users and app vendors. Those competitors could offer a 90% discount on payment processing to every crafter on Etsy, every performer on Patreon, every podcaster and news outlet accepting subscriptions through their apps, every game dev, every media store. They could offer them a 90% discount on payments, and that business would be worth $10 billion a year. So Finland might never see another Nokia, but Nokia was in a very tough business. They had to make hardware. It was expensive. It was risky. If the European Union legalizes jailbreaking, Apple will have to incur all of that risk of making and fielding that hardware, and Finnish geeks could cream off $100 billion a year that Apple is sucking out of the global economy in an act of disgusting rip-off rent-seeking. You know, when Jeff Bezos started Amazon, his mantra to his suppliers was, your margin is my opportunity. With these guys, it's always disruption for thee, but never for me. When they do it to us, it's progress. If we do it to them, it's piracy. And of course, every pirate wants to be an admiral. Well, fuck that. Move fast and break Tim Cook's things. Move fast and break King's. It's funny, I spent 25 years getting my ass kicked all around the world by the US Trade Representative. Now, in my defense, it was not a fair fight. And I developed a kind of grudging admiration for the skill with which the USTR bound the entire world to a system of trade that conferred parochial advantages to America and its tech firms, giving them free rein to loot the data and economic value from every country in the world. So it's been pretty amazing to watch Trump swiftly and decisively dismantle this global system of trade and destroy the case for the world, continuing to arrange its affairs to the interests of America's capital class. I mean, it's not the path I would have chosen. I'd prefer to have no Trump at all than to getting this breakthrough. But, you know, I'll take this massive own goal if Trump insists. I'm not saying that I've become an accelerationist, but I'm not exactly not an accelerationist either. Inshinification at its root is about constraint. The constraints that stop companies from screwing us, like competition. If you cheat your customers or your suppliers or your workers, all else being equal, they'll go somewhere else. So what happened to competition? Well, 40 years ago, those same neoclassical economists who believe that you have a revealed preference for only having one kidney, they also discarded the idea that governments should police competition and stop monopolies from forming. They installed a new idea that monopolies were efficient. In other words, they said if Google has a 90% search market share, then we should infer that Google is the best search company the world could produce, that we're all using their products because they're the best products, and wouldn't it be perverse to punish Google for making the best products that please us all so much that we voluntarily use them? So 40 years ago, governments around the world explicitly adopted a pro-monopoly policy. Reagan, Thatcher, Brian Mulroney in Canada, Helmut Kohl, all around the world was the neoliberal revolution. And afterwards, we got monopolies in every single sector of the economy. Pharmaceuticals, beer, mattresses, even professional wrestling. The economists who conceived of these policies, they are still around today. And when we confront them with the wreckage that their advice gave us, they protest their innocence. It's like we used to put down rat poison, and we didn't have a rat problem. And then these guys convinced us we didn't need rat poison anymore, and now the rats are eating our faces off. And when we ask them about this, they say, well, how do you know it's our fault that the rats exploded in population? Perhaps this is merely the time of the rat. Have you considered that sunspots, the great forces of history, the iron laws of economics, may have made rats more fecund than at any time in our history? And sure, it's true. The rats did buy all the rat poison factories and shut them down. But look, if we're not using rat poison anymore, that is just economically rational. So we lost markets as a constraint. And as it slipped away, we lost another form of discipline, the discipline of regulation, the constraints that governments impose on firms. Because competition is a necessary prerequisite for regulation. When a sector collapses into oligarchy, when the internet turns into 5 giant websites filled with screenshots of text from the other 4, then it finds it easy to capture its regulators. After all, if there's a sector with 100 competing companies, it will be a rabble. It won't be able to agree on anything, much less what it's going to ask for from government. But a sector that is boiled down to an incestuous handful of firms, they can agree on a common lobbying position. And because they are a slosh in cash, they can use that to capture their regulators. I beg your pardon. Sorry. A bit of another speech slipped into this one. So, as a result of this regulatory capture, as a result of this concentration, we see firms that are able to flout other laws, not just competition law. So you may have noticed that the big tech firms gather a lot of data on us. This is clearly a problem. It creates problems in lots of different ways. Not just that the ads that are targeted to you are obnoxious, not just that they have leaks, but also because people can buy your data, there are lots of ways that they can abuse you with it. So in America, nursing has collapsed into 4 giant national contract labor services through which nurses are hired by hospitals. And these 4 apps, they all build themselves as a kind of Uber for nurses. They use surveillance data. They buy data on nurses from data brokers to find out how much credit card debt nurses are carrying. And before they're offered a shift, their wages are tightened down based on how much economic desperation can be inferred about them, right? They're paying a desperation premium that is, of course, self-reinforcing, because the more data that is used to make you poorer, the more desperate you'll be and the lower wage you'll accept. So how is it that the platforms are able to do this, right? Well, what is it that drives this? Is it some unregulability of technology? Do we just have no way to anticipate that this might be a consequence, and as a result they're able to do it? No, it's because privacy law in America has been deadlocked for 40 years. The last consumer privacy law that they passed through the Congress was a law called the Video Privacy Protection Act of 1988. It's a law that bans video store clerks from disclosing your VHS matches. So the reason these tech companies spy on you is the same reason your dog licks its balls, right? Because they can't, because no one makes them stop. And in Europe, we have the GDPR, which on paper looks a lot better than the laws that they have in America. But of course, in Europe, you also have the incredibly transparent gambit of just pretending that you're Irish. And if you pretend that you're Irish, the Irish government doesn't want you to up sticks and go to another country, because there are other tax havens you could depart for: Malta, Cyprus, Luxembourg. And so so long as you're pretending you're Irish, the Irish government will not enforce its laws against you. And so we see Apple, Google, Meta able to abuse European privacy laws. So these privacy violations, they're the result of this regulatory capture. It is the collapse in competition that led the companies lobby governments, and it's the lobbying of governments that allows them to go along and violate our laws. Now, regulatory capture isn't just about breaking the law, it's also about mobilizing the law, as we saw with those anti-circumvention laws that make it a crime to modify technology. Without those laws, tech companies would have to worry that their enshittifying claims would be foiled by technologists who ship code that will fix their defective products. That means that once you've got a closed platform, you don't have to worry anymore that a competitor will enter the market with something that remediates the defects that you've deliberately introduced. So imagine that this was a product planning meeting for our website. And the person chairing the meeting says, now, as you know, our bonuses this year will be paid out on the basis of how many clicks we get on our ads. And I've calculated that we can get 2% more clicks if we make the ads 20% more invasive. And so that's my plan. If you were to say that in a product planning meeting for a website, someone around the table who does not care at all about user welfare might still put their hand up and say, Elon, I love how you think. But has it occurred to you that when we make the ads 20% more obnoxious and invasive, 40% of our users might go and install an ad blocker, after which the revenue from those users will fall to zero forever, because no one has ever uninstalled an ad blocker voluntarily, right? So that having been done at the website stage, you move on to the next item on the agenda, which is ads in the app. And the person chairing the meeting says, well, I've done the same back of the envelope calculation. We make the ads in the app 20% more invasive and obnoxious. We'll get 2% more clicks. And the same person who put his hand up the last time will say, why are you stopping at 20%? It doesn't matter if someone types, how do I block ads on this app into their search engine? Because the answer is you can't, because it's a felony under anti-circumvention laws all over the world. Why don't we make the ads 40% more obnoxious and more invasive? So what that means is that if we were to take away the regulatory capture, our technologists could do a great deal to protect us from these extractive, enshittificatory impulses of the ketamine-addled Zucker-Muskian failures who have appointed themselves the eternal lords over our digital lives. After all, many technologists fell in love with computers when getting online connected them with communities and ideas that transform their lives for the better. It put words to feelings that they've never been able to articulate and expanded their life's chances beyond the constraints of their birth. And many of those people want nothing more than to help other people achieve those benefits. Just ask a Linux user to tell you about how great their computer is and then try and make them stop. So these techies, they were trying, they wanted to fight for the user. And they were powerful for a while. Silicon Valley engineers were adding $1 million a piece to the bottom line of the firms they worked for. That's why they got free kombucha and massages and surgeons who freeze their eggs so they could work through their fertile years. It wasn't because their bosses liked them, it was because there were 10 other bosses at the factory gates who hired you in an eye blank. And if you walked at the door, $1 million would walk out with you. So when bosses told tech workers to enshittify their products, tech workers would tell them to fuck off. But the problem was the tech workers didn't think that they were workers. They thought that they were temporarily embarrassed founders. They thought they were entrepreneurs in waiting. And so when they had that power from scarcity, they never consolidated it with solidarity by forming a union. And then after 500,000 tech layoffs in Silicon Valley in the last 3 years, tech workers cannot tell their bosses to fuck off anymore because there are 10 other workers at the factory gates waiting for it to take their jobs. So we know how bosses at tech firms treat the workers that they're not afraid of. If you're a programmer at Amazon, you get to show up with a pink mohawk, facial piercings, and a black t-shirt with slogans that make your boss uncomfortable. But if you're a delivery driver for Amazon, you are observed by 18 cameras, you're logged into 9 apps, and you have to pee in a bottle because you don't get a pee break. For a man with a penis-shaped rocket, Jeff Bezos is weirdly hostile to our kidneys. But there is nothing about writing code for Amazon that says you can't be made to pee in a bottle. When the constraints of competition and regulation and interoperability and labor all melted away, the terrible people who run these companies got to do the terrible things they'd always dreamt of doing. But the reason they're doing it is not because they are terrible. The reason they're doing it is because our policymakers failed us. Policymakers created the enshitogenic environment where the worst ideas and the worst people make the most money. So that is where our salvation lies. Not in agonizing about your consumption choices, whether you should be on Twitter or Blue Sky. Shopping your way out of monopoly is like recycling your way out of a wildfire. Sure, use the technology that makes your life better. The next time you go out on a big demonstration, go to the ssd.eff.org and download EFF's surveillance self-defense kit that will help you remain private when you're out on a demo. But you won't keep yourself safe just by making good technological choices, any more than you're going to save the planet just by putting solar on your roof. If you want a better world, a world where technology helps you mobilize to save our planet and our comrades, then you need to be part of a polity. You need to get involved in organizations. So like I say, I work at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF.org, a member-supported, not-for-profit that has all kinds of ways you can get involved. You can go to EFF.org and see that yourself. I helped found an organization called the Open Rights Group here in the UK, openrightsgroup.org. We agitate for real digital sovereignty. We'd like you to be our member. We want to be grounded in something more meaningful than building data centers that consume the last few drops of potable British navigable water that haven't been contaminated by human feces, and replace it with something more meaningful, like repealing our implementation of the copyright directive and the rules that say we're not allowed to fix America's defective tech exports, I mean, the Europeans shouldn't have this law on their books now that America has violated its trade obligations. But we here in the UK, we absolutely do not need to have the European Copyright Directive on our books because, and you may have heard this, Brexit means Brexit. Which means that we don't have to have anything to do with the UCB anymore. Now, beyond joining a tech liberation group, join a union. Unions are the opposite of fascism. That is why fascists attack organized labor first. And get involved in local politics. There are local races coming up in a couple of weeks. And these local decisions are incredibly important to your digital future. Like, for example, whether your local authority lets your local police buy flock cameras. In America, it turns out to make the difference between whether your neighbors will be kidnapped and sent to an onshore black site or an offshore slave labor camp. Above all, try and solve these things as a polity and not by voting with your wallet. Billionaires love it when you try and vote with your wallet because billionaires each have wallets thicker than all of our wallets put together. There's only a couple of thousand of them. It's the only vote they can win, is the wallet vote. You cannot solve systemic problems with consumption choices. You solve systemic problems with systemic solutions. You individually can't solve any problems, but we together can. Thank you.
So much, Cory. Fantastic. Now, at a lot of academic conferences, after we've had a speech like that, they have a respondent. So we've tried to organize this in the same way. It's not an academic conference, but Sofia Scasserra from Argentina is an academic, as well as a campaigner and an activist. She is the director of the Observatory of Social Impacts of Artificial Intelligence at the National University of Tres de Febrero in Argentina. She researches the digital economy with the wonderful Transnational Institute based in the Netherlands and the Trade Union Confederation of the Americas, and is a strategic advisor to Our World Is Not the Same Network, which Global Justice has been part of for very many years. I've had a wonderful week with Sofia. We've been talking to MPs, we've been talking to other campaigners, and we think it is really, really important. The movement we build against big tech is international. So it's fantastic to welcome you to the plenary, Sofia.
Thank you very much. It's really hard to be like commenting Cory with so much charisma going on. Like, it doesn't matter how funny I will try to be, I will not be as funny. And also I have a language barrier there, which is kind of complicated, but I will try to make my best. So I am all of those things, but among all, I'm a trade unionist. I started in the trade union movement when I was 17 years old. I started in Argentina in the middle of the worst economic crisis we have seen so far, till now the one that's coming with Milei, but which is going to be worse, I can tell you that. But I was studying economics, so I'm an economist, one of those people who tell you that you're a kidney, with one kidney. But I was studying economics, and I remember being in the room, and they were telling me how great neoliberalism was, and I looked outside the window, and I saw the riots, and I was like, there's something here I just don't quite understand. Maybe it's not that good, the Washington Consensus. Anyways, so that's where I grew up, and I grew up being a trade unionist. And it's something I learned is that trade unionists are anti-fascist, and that's why these guys don't like them, but they also are capitalists, because with a trade union, they want the corporations to do well, because that means good jobs, and that means collective bargaining, and that means better salaries. So we're all part of the same structure, the same progressive structure, and we all have different goals, but we all share one future that we want decent labor, that we want an economy that works for everybody, that we don't want extractivism, that we don't want colonialism, that we want a world that it's good for everybody, and that we want to get rid of poverty. So we share the same values, but we don't share the same objectives. And we have to take that into account when we build the struggles, the international struggles. And the regions are different. It's not the same, the narratives you manage in the UK and the agenda that you're fighting for, the agenda that we're fighting in Latin America, in Asia, and elsewhere, or the BRICS. Sometimes we look at the BRICS like a light of hope, the counterpower to the US big tech. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but Moody is not exactly a progressive person, Bolsonaro was not either. Now it's Lula in place, but BRICS is also Bolsonaro if he comes back, China is not really progressive. So we need to take that into account. So in the middle of all of that, it's us, the progressive forces, the people, who we actually care about this. And we're trying to find our way into this disaster that we have spoken throughout the day. And there's, I think, I totally agree with Cory, what Cory's saying about institutions, get involved with an institution, because that's the only way that we can fight this back. It's not individuals fighting back this power, it's institutions fighting back this power. I have seen this on social media. Whenever a person dares to stand up against the power, they just kill them on social media. They are devastated. But with institutions, it's harder to do that. It's much, much harder. And institutions can have the power to influence governments, to influence the agenda. The reason why governments did not do anything for the last 20 or 30 years with big tech is because we didn't do anything with big tech. And we need to take the responsibility for that, because we were super comfortable using the freaking apps on our cell phones. And we didn't question it. I questioned it because I worked in technology. You might have questioned it because you're activists, but society did not. Society did not care. And when you talk about these things, people will label you as anti-technologists. Why do you hate technology? No, I don't hate technology. I want to democratize technology. I want to have accountability of what technology is doing. I don't want these guys to be more powerful than a king or than a government. We already got rid of kings, or not so much.
We're working on it.
Solved that. We're working on that. We already solved that debate. And apparently it's coming back. We have new kings. We have the tech empire. We have new people who are in power. And with great power comes great responsibility. They say, well, I don't give a shit. I don't care. I don't want great responsibility. I don't want power concentration. That's what I don't want. So in that sense, we need to start doing several agendas to get involved. We need to get involved in the tax justice movement. I just can't believe these people are not aware of what's going on in the digital trade agenda, for instance, and how we're just giving away vacations for everybody. It's no problem. You cannot pay taxes. Who's gonna pay for the state? Who's gonna pay for our living? Nobody, because we don't have taxes to raise. The feminist movements are doing a great deal in Latin America. They're the only ones who are standing up against the power of Milei and the power of Bolsonaro when he was in place. Hopefully he's not going to come back, but maybe he will. So the feminist movements in many countries are the ones who are standing up, and they do not have a digital agenda. Some they do. I am part of those debates, but it's not concrete. Unions are working a lot on this. They are starting to collective bargaining over technology. They're starting to do data governance agreements. They're starting to try to build democratization into the technologies that they're using in workplaces. And I have seen this throughout the world. I come from the international trade union movement. We are negotiating this type of things, and we're starting to build alliances. The international trade union movement was built and was born internationally. We need to learn a lot from the trade union movement, because they are an international movement. Is there something I learned from the trade unions? Is that they see the working class as one, and there's no difference. And they build solidarity. That's how they were born. And we need to learn from that, because these guys, they're international. They're international. So the only way to respond is with an international response. There's no way to respond to this locally. If you try to respond only locally, you're so dead. You're so dead. You're not going to fight this back. But if you start thinking about internationally, you are going to do that. And we will have to fight back. We will have to struggle. Just tell me which labor right it was given to you for free. None. You always have to fight for your rights. Always have to fight for your rights. And this is not something that's going to happen. Nobody's going to give it to you. Governments are not going to give it to you. If you don't start working in institutions with the digital agenda, trying to get the agenda in the political agenda, and therefore into the state and into power. That's the way we grow. We grow from a bottom-up approach. We don't expect the solutions from up above, because they're not going to come. Most of our governments, even the progressive governments, don't do anything against big tech unless they find that their people, the people who voted for them, knock at their doors and push the agenda, because it's too comfortable not to do anything, because these guys are so powerful. So we need to start knowing that if we don't mobilize the civil society through our institutions, nobody will move this agenda. I think that we are in a moment where we can get them. And I think, to be honest with you, and I'm not trying to be positive because I'm in a conference and we're closing and everything. I do think that they are scared. Because what you can see through the trade agreements that Cory was mentioning and that I saw on the last ministerial in Cameroon is that they are walking inside the rooms saying, we want the digital trade deal or nothing. Because they know that if they don't pass an international trading system with rules that overpass the state to keep having that architecture of impunity that they're having, states can get even. We can get back. They know we can get back. And that's why they're so eager to get these free trade agreements. They're so eager to pass the digital trade deals. Not just some deals, digital trade deals. Because they know we can get back. They know we can regain the power. They know we can democratize technology. And by democratizing technology, I don't mean only building cooperative technologies, which I would love and I would totally support, and I would love all technologies to be built like that. It's also, if the state is going to hold the technology, who's going to control that? Who's going to have a quota on that technology? Who are going to be the investors? How can we as a society control what the government is doing with that technology? So to think about institutionally, what technologies are we going to build and how we're going to control them as a society? Because we already deal with that with power, with the state power. We can deal that with technological power. We have to come up with solutions. And solutions might look different across regions and across the world. They don't need to look the same. They don't need to be exactly the same. Even in politics, the state doesn't look the same in every country. We have ways of balancing the power and controlling the power, but it doesn't look the same in every country. We don't have the same elections, we don't have the same parliaments, we don't. We come up with a solution for each country and for each way of thinking. But it was an international movement. We tried to push for that, and we got it. And we can democratize technology in that sense. So to try to give a silver lining to all of this, I know it's hard, but I will finish with the importance of educating our children, because I see that children are alone in the internet. We have left them in the internet, like if we leave a child in the middle of a square playing and we're like, I'll pick you up in 10 hours, don't worry. Nobody does that with their children. And with technology, we have done that. And I've seen children being raised with technology in their hands, and they are questioning technologies in ways that we can't imagine. They just don't have the political education to be able to evaluate what's really going on. And I'm trying to work with the International of Education, which is the organization that unites all the teachers' unions across the world, into capacity building to try to raise this in the curricula in education, because I can see that right now we're having a gap, a terrible gap. We, the millennials and beyond, we have the political education, but we have no idea what's going on in the internet. We think we do, but we don't. And the kids know what is going on in the internet, and some of them, they already have critical thinking, but they don't have an adult to take them and lead them in the fight. and the struggle against that technology. We need to start talking with the youth. We need to start organizing ourselves with the youth. It just breaks my heart whenever I go to a trade union and I see old guys. It just breaks my heart. It's like, where's the youth? No, those guys, they want to open a website, and I don't know, it's too complicated because then we're gonna get judged. What? You can check what they're doing, but you need to work together. Otherwise, we're so screwed. We're so screwed. Because those guys are the ones who are going to lead the fight. Those guys, those generations are the ones who are going to face this problem. Those are the ones who are out of a job right now, who don't have the capacity to buy a house or to have a stable job. They already face the consequences of all this disaster. They just need the political education to be able to move forward because they already have the technological tools to fight back. We have cases of cyber activism all around the world, and they're great. They're amazing. I see cases that are just totally stunning, like the Trump when they opened up the campaign in Tulsa and they sold all the tickets and the stadium was empty. This type of, it was amazing. If you don't know the case, just Google it because it's amazing. But anyways, what I'm trying to say here is that we have a thick agenda. I know it's heartbreaking. The workers in the past had to fight against the industrial machines, the steam machine. Now we have to fight against the algorithm, which is something weird to say that it's not we're fighting against the algorithm. It's another superpower, but it's the same class struggle. Nothing has changed. It's the same tennis match. They just changed the surface in which we're playing, but it's the same over and over and over again. And we always won. Always. We always find a way to win. It was never 100% win. I admit that. We always have ups and downs, but we move forward as a society. We live far better now than what we lived 500 years ago. We are far better now. We gain a lot of rights in terms of LGBTQ, in terms of feminism, we won a lot of rights. Labor rights, we work far better than we used to work. So what I mean is that nothing was ever given us for free, nothing. I know it's hard, I know it's gonna be a terrible struggle, but it's the struggle of our epoch. And we need to have the responsibility to take the power back, regain the power back. Democratize technology. And we can only do that if we are activists in our own institutions, in our own societies. It doesn't matter if it's environmental groups, the justice groups, tech groups, feminist groups, doesn't really matter. Your trade union, join a union, please do. But just try to get involved politically and bring this agenda forward, because otherwise we are screwed. We cannot afford to lose this battle because it's the battle of our times. In the past, the people who were before us, they had their wins, they had their victories. We have to have our victories now. And our victories are these, trying to be together, fighting back these big tech empires. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sofia, so much, Cory. Now, I'm going to go straight over to you, because I'm sure you've got a lot of questions and you've been sitting very patiently. So we've got some roving mics coming round.
And a good question has one part and not two. And it's not more of a comment.
You've done a few of these things.
Paul,
There's a woman right here, yes, absolutely. Tom, if I could give you a second.
Hi, thanks a lot for this inspirational speeches. It's really inspirational. I'm paying us so I'll I work for Amnesty International, specifically Amnesty Tech, which is and as you know, Amnesty International is a very 1960s organization, with a model where we are firmly embedded in international framework. And we can't say anything without without our experts. Honest experts, you say it's what you say, because of the big implications. And we give an example, for instance, we can't talk about tax sovereignty because sovereignty is such a convoluted, such a. So, what do you think? So, as the Canadian Prime Minister said, international frameworks. What do you think? Is there a future for organizations like ours or international human rights network to survive or to each other?
Thank you. We'll do three.
Okay.
Cory, the normal standard. Tom, down here at the front. Keep putting your hands up if you're.
Yeah, thank you so much for it's really like I'm learning a lot, and my question is around user welfare. I'm from an organisation from Mad Youth Organised, and we're running a big tech campaign that is highlighting the kind of lived experience of young people who have suffered online harms and are kind of resisting big tech and are kind of politicizing our mental illness and kind of identifying the enemy in terms of the algorithm is kind of being designed and built to ignore user welfare. And I think my question is around, kind of internationally, there's a lot of talk around the social media ban and countries are implementing these bans for young people. We, as an organisation, are kind of against this ban because it allows these big tech growers to kind of continue doing exactly what they're doing and without kind of identifying the or addressing the actual kind of structural issues that are creating the harm. And so I think my question is around user welfare and how can we kind of protect and I suppose protect young people from these kind of dangerous online spaces and the harmful content that can be kind of become a barrage for these young people without locking out young people from these kind of vital social spaces.
Thank you. Thank you. There was a guy. Yes, guy here in the middle. Yes.
Okay, I'm a GNU/Linux user, by the way. But so, we as a society, we want access to culture, music, movies, whatever, scientific papers, and copyright is frequently used to criminalize such broad global access. On the other hand, we've been seeing big tech consuming lots of data indiscriminately. So my question is, do you feel that copyright law is being used applied in a different way to different sectors of society?
Thank you very much.
Can we take those three?
Yeah. Three great questions, right? So I'll come back to you, Cory. Keep putting your hands up if you're interested. I've got
you, but I'm gonna.
Yeah.
All right. So on the question of sovereignty and what role international human rights framework NGOs play in this. So anytime you see a group of people who have been trying to do something for a long time and failing, and then they start to succeed, it's almost never because they came up with a cool new way to campaign. It's usually because they found coalition partners. And by definition, a coalition partner is not someone who wants the same thing as you. If they wanted the same thing as you, you'd just be a group. Right? A coalition partners are people who want some of the same things and have, in many cases, incommensurable other goals, which is always a problem with coalitions, and you see this with Trump and him holding together his coalition. We also see how powerful that coalition is for him, these incommensurable views. I mean, this is a coalition that includes Nick Fuentes, who is an avowed Nazi, and Ben Shapiro, who is, a fascist of another stripe, but Fuentes would turn Shapiro into a lampshade if he could, right? And they're in the same coalition, right? So that's a very powerful thing to be in. So where do organizations that are rightfully suspicious of the problems of sovereignty fit in a movement about digital sovereignty and digital self-determination? Because for me, I care about digital sovereignty as a path to digital self-determination to groups and individuals, not for states. I don't care if Canada or Britain is digitally sovereign. I care if Canadians or Britons are digitally sovereign if we are able to determine how we do these things. So I have a different goal than, say, the national security hawks who are piling into this stuff. But I can see how they have an audience both in the halls of power and in the public, that I don't have. And I can march alongside of them for quite some way before we get to the point where we're gonna have to move. And I'm sure I'm telling you things you already know, because Amnesty International is a wonderful coalition builder and a wonderful member of so many coalitions. So I think that this is just yet another version of this. So you don't have to campaign for China to have maximal digital sovereignty to spy on as many Uyghurs as it can. To still say that if there is a digital sovereignty agenda in other countries, it will help the people in those countries avoid being spied upon by, say, Trump or Xi. And it doesn't have to be in the name of sovereignty, it can be in the name of human rights, but you have a commensurable goal with digital sovereignty advocates. On the question of user welfare, I was relieved to hear that you're not supporting social media bans. I think it's really important that we recognize that there is no such thing as age verification. There is only mass surveillance, right? You cannot verify someone's age without spying on everything they do, right? You have to know who they are, and then you have to be able to monitor which identity that you've affirmatively identified is over or under a certain age is doing what at all times. So you have to gather gigantic amounts of information on children, right? So this is a very weird way to protect children, is by gathering, by having the tech companies that have abused them so horribly gather as much information as they can about them to make sure that they're not showing them the wrong information. But you also have to gather information on adults. And we have already seen where that terminates, right? We've seen this with the change in government with Trump, where a lot of data that was held for one purpose is now being reused for another. So in the European Union, Trump has ordered American tech companies to give over the private communications of European enforcers who tried to regulate big tech. And he's barred 6 of them from ever entering the United States, and there's another tranche coming where it's going to be dozens and dozens of European enforcers who can never enter. So that's one way it's being used. It's also being used to find people who are mean about Charlie Kirk and get them fired, to gather the identity of everyone who shows up at a Black Lives Matter or No Kings protest. So in general, we want these firms to gather less data on us and not more, which raises this question: what do we do about the online harms that people suffer? Because they're real, right? And not only are the pain of harassment and other negative campaigns that go on platforms themselves are complicit in. Not only are those things real, but they're not evenly distributed. They are disproportionately visited upon people who are already members of disfavored minorities. And so the people who have the least support are getting the most suffering as a result of these policies. And I think at that point, it's worth asking yourself, why would a member of a much abused, disfavored minority group stay on a social media platform where they're subject to endless harassment and abuse? And you ask the question and it answers itself, because the only thing worse than being a member of a disfavored minority group who's subjected to endless harassment is being a member of a disfavored minority group who's subject to endless harassment, and you are isolated from other people like you. You're trapped there by your friends, and they're trapped there by you. Everyone's taking each other hostage to this collective action problem. Now, it doesn't have to be. You know, when Mark Zuckerberg was trying to get users off of MySpace, he didn't just say, come use Facebook, it has a better privacy policy. He gave them a bot, he gave them a scraper, and you gave that scraper your MySpace login and password. And it went to MySpace several times a day, pretended to be you, grabbed everything MySpace wanted to show you, and put it in your Facebook feed. You reply it and push it back out again. Right? They created a kind of interoperable gateway between these two, so you could eat your cake and have it too. You could talk to your mates, but also be on a platform that had a better privacy policy and better moderation policies. Now, when we try to do that to Mark Zuckerberg, he uses anti-circumvention law and other IP laws to destroy us. We could impose an obligation on these platforms to force them to let us go. That's what we did with the mobile carriers. So, you know, it used to be that if you were on O2, you would get free calling to your friends who were on O2 and you'd be trapped on O2 and so on. And we just passed a law that required them to unlock their phones so you could just switch carriers really easily. And no one has ever called anyone else and said, hey, you would not believe which SIM is in my phone today, right? It is the most AOL prodigy CompuServe-ass thing imaginable. You have to give a shit which network someone's on in order to talk to them. It's very weird when you think about it. It's like we travel back in time to the 90s. So we could try and impose an obligation on these firms, where we go to the mobile carriers and say, you must allow someone who's left Twitter or Facebook and gone to another platform or TikTok or what have you, and gone to another platform to continue to see the messages for them on that platform. They tried to do that in Europe with the Digital Markets Act. And thus far, the platform just said no. And you can't make us. Trump will hunt down your enforcers and ban them from ever entering the United States if you try it. And so we've seen that, you know, there comes a point when a firm is not just too big to fail, it's too big to fail and too big to care. But there is one area where the United Kingdom, the European Union, Canada, every country has total dominion over these platforms, which is the whether or not we let them use our courts to shut down domestic firms that open up their platforms without their consent. So in 2022, 2 teenagers built an alternative client for Instagram that pretended to be you, logged into Instagram, grabbed everything waiting for you, threw away all the ads, threw away all the suggestions, threw away all the algorithmic content, threw away all of the boosted content, threw away everything except the things from the people you followed in reverse chronological order with no surveillance, so sent no telemetry. The app was called the OG app. It was so successful that it hit the top 10 of both app stores that day. And then that night, Apple and Google removed it because Facebook asked them to. So, you know, again, when Mark Zuckerberg did it to Rupert Murdoch, that was progress. If we do it to him, it's not piracy. And so we could just decide unilaterally that we're going to let people build those tools so that you could adversarially build in that interoperability and let people escape. You know, for 20 years, our approach to regulating these companies has been trying to get them to act better, right? As though the issue with someone like Mark Zuckerberg nominating himself digital czar for life over 4 billion people is that he's the wrong person to have that job. And the reality is that job shouldn't exist, right? We don't need a better Mark Zuckerberg. We need to abolish Mark Zuckerberg, right? That job just needs to stop existing. So when we think about these interoperability mandates where we just make it easier for people to leave, where we make the platforms less important, not better, what we're doing is we are moving towards a world where we don't have to harness these companies and make them behave themselves. We can just leave them when they stop behaving themselves. And then the last question was about copyright and AI. And so I wrote a book in 2022 with Rebecca Giblin, who's a great copyright lawyer in Australia, called Choke Point Capitalism. And the question we set out to answer with that book is how is it that for 40 years we've monotonically expanded copyright? So copyright now lasts longer, it covers more kinds of works, it restricts more uses, the statutory penalties are higher, and it's easier to secure those penalties when your copyright is violated. And over 40 years, media companies have gotten larger and richer. They're larger and richer than they've ever been. And the share of income going to creators has declined in both real terms and as a share of that higher income. So how is it that we give creators more rights and they end up with less money? Well, the answer is the same as is that when you're bargaining into a market where you have 5 publishers and 4 studios and 3 record labels and 2 companies that control all the apps and 1 company that controls all the ebooks and audiobooks, then getting more rights to bargain with is just getting more rights to bargain away. It's like giving your bully school kid extra lunch money. It doesn't matter how much lunch money you give the school kid, the bullies are going to take it. If you give that kid enough money, the bullies will have so much left over that they can run an international campaign where they say, think of the hungry children, give them more lunch money. So we have these AI companies, and they are grabbing lots of stuff that creative teams have built and that other people have made. And our bosses in the creative industry would like us to believe that the answer is to get more copyright. And that if we create a new copyright, in the UK it's a little more ambiguous, but in the US it's pretty unambiguous that making a transient copy of a work, performing some mathematical analysis on it, and then publishing that analysis, which is all the model training is, that all of those things are lawful under copyright law. You can use a model in a way that infringes copyright, but the creation of the model is probably lawful under American copyright. But we could amend it, right? We could create a new copyright law that says you have this affirmative right to block training. Well, what would our bosses do, right? This is what our bosses want. So what would they do if we had that right? Well, we saw the writer's strike in Hollywood. We saw the actor's strike. And we learned from that that our bosses don't want to abolish AI or stop it from being used to erode workers' wages. They just want to control it, right? They want to be paid for the training data. They want to make sure that if you train a model on Disney content, that studio that is a rival to Disney can't use that content to compete with Disney. And we know from previous experience, 40 years experience, that if we create a new right for creative workers, that all they'll do is amend their standard contract to take that right away from us. They will. I don't think it really matters to me as a creative worker whether the person who is pauperizing me is as a technology executive or a media executive. And I think that what we've seen in the last 10 years as these two kinds of firms infused is that you get the effect from the end of Animal Farm where you can look for the pigs for the men and the men for the pigs and not see the difference. Tech executives are media executives are tech executives. So what do we do? Well, in the U.S., let me just finish this. So in the U.S., we have a very interesting circumstance where the U.S. Copyright Office has repeatedly said that works generated by algorithms are not eligible for copyrights. And copyright is only for things that people make. That's why the monkey selfie is in the public domain. And the only thing our bosses hate more than paying us is having people take the things we make without paying them. And if the only way they can stop people from taking their things and giving them away or selling them is by paying us, then they will. And I think that's the right answer.
Can I say something?
Okay, so I wanted to, because he already answered, and I think it's good, but I want to build on something that Cory said. That it's, so for me, sovereignty looks very different in very different contexts. It's not the same, sovereignty is not the same word in Latin America, that in Africa, that in Europe. It's not the same word. We are talking about totally different concepts. So I don't like to use the word sovereignty because I feel like we don't understand each other when we're talking about sovereignty. But there's something that is true, that it's sovereignty is giving people the power, giving back the power to each citizen in the world. And in that sense, I think to keep on bringing hope and light into this debate, I think that there's something really important that we have done in the last years, that is that we already placed the political debate in the agenda. Politicians are not aware and they're not doing anything, and they even look like they're going in the opposite direction. But the public sphere, yes, they are starting to doubt about these technologies. 20 years ago, you spoke bad about Facebook and they will look at you like, you're crazy, you know? But now, no. Now it's totally different. Now people feel surveilled. They know, it's like, oh, I talked about something and now it's showing on my advertising feed, you know, like they know this stuff is happening. And so there's ground to keep on doing this debate. And in that sense, I want to come back to the first part of my presentation, that is, choose your allies. Choose your allies. I said that we all share the same values, but we have different objectives, and we're all different. And sometimes we have to unite with organizations that they're not quite what we thought they would be. I have a case, for instance, in Argentina. I was working in La Pampa provinces, which is a state, it's kind of like a province, a state inside Argentina. We were really fighting for getting shops closed on Sunday, you know, with the trade union. It was like a huge struggle there against the political power because we wanted to close the stores on Sunday. And it was like something huge. And in the middle of the fight, we realized that churches could be our allies because you need to go to mass. And so all of a sudden we have this huge campaign with all the churches, the Catholic, the Mormons, the Evangelics, everybody was on board, and we won it, and we beat it, and we got it. So it depends who's your ally on each region, on each country, that you're able to build a campaign and you're able to build something that is meaningful for the people to bring the power back. That's all I wanted to add to shape a little bit more what we mean by choose your allies.
Thank you. I'm being waved at, actually, and I see some people are leaving, so I don't want you to leave half the room empty. So I'm going to say thank you.
Thank you.
Very, very much, Cory. Thank you very, very much, Sofia. I really want to thank you, the Balanced Economy Project, who have supported this event. We couldn't have done it without them. Claire is here and some of her team. If you don't know about the Balanced Economy Project, they are trying to build a movement against monopoly power, monopoly capitalism. Check them out. They've got a great report out this week on tech and AI. And of course, I want to thank the Global Justice Now team and our activists who have helped make this event run really, really smoothly. You can see some of them around the room with your t-shirts. Thank you. And I've got to say a particular thank you to Daisy, who has done a phenomenal job. And a huge thank you to all of our speakers, but particularly to Sofia and Anita. Where's Anita gone? It's Anita's birthday today, and she's spending Look, as an organisation, we have been fighting corporate power for 50 years, and we've had some real successes in that time, but the threat we face now is greater than at any point in our existence. This is the interesting thing. We were told, when I was younger, that the free market was a perfect bedfellow of liberal democracy. Well, we can see the truth of that now. We can see that corporate power, left completely unchecked, which is what that free market program was all about, has hollowed out our democracy, has destroyed our environment, and has brought our societies to the brink of crisis. And I think it's clear, too, that if we allow these robber barons, these tech giants and their corporate bedfellows to continue monopolizing the world's resources, we can kiss goodbye to democracy. If we embed artificial intelligence into everything that we need to use, we can kiss goodbye to having a livable planet. And so there's really no other choice. We have to fight this. We have to resist this. There's no third way this time. We need to take down the robber barons, or else the world will continue to get more repressive, more unequal, more crisis prone. And as Sofia said, is it overwhelming? Yeah, it's really overwhelming. But then again, look back at our history, the history of our movement. We stand in such a proud tradition of people who fought for votes, for workers' rights, against slavery, against apartheid. And for most of those struggles, they did so in circumstances much worse than we live in today. So we have no right to give up. We can't give up. What do we do now? I'm going to give you 3 little things. First of all, we can only do this work if our organizations continue to thrive. We, as Global Justice Now, are completely dependent upon ordinary members. That's what keeps us independent. It keeps us being able to say what we say. If you have not yet joined Global Justice Now, I don't know what else to tell you. Get out there before you leave and sign a membership form. We need you. If you're already a member, join a local group, join the youth network, if you're younger than me, or start a group if there isn't already one in your area. Again, local activism is in our lifeblood. It is the only thing that changes society. If you've done both of those things, then why not impress your families and friends by supporting one of our new t-shirts? Especially designed for today. They're beautiful, they're on sale outside. And finally, join one of our campaigns. Get Palantir out of this country. Stop the data centers and demand that our Prime Minister gets off his knees and declare his independence from Trump's big tech oligarchy. We absolutely can win this. It seemed, as I said earlier, it may seem impossible, but all things that are big seem impossible until we do them. Thank you for coming today.